welcome to Lesson 8, Putting It All Together, a discussion session. My name's Dave Miller, and I have with me the founder of the Institute for Productive Tension, T. Falcon Napier. And
Hi, everybody.
I'm going to hand this over to T. We're going to demonstrate for you, and T's going to do a little review with us, and then we're going to do a little demo to show you how to put all this together.
Yep. So, hi, everybody. You've already gone through 7 lessons, a good, how many hours worth of training, but you know the basics now, and we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to see how the whole process comes together. And so we put together the discovery session on putting it all together. So we've already walked you through all the different elements and how you might use them. But I'd like to start this discussion session by just refreshing your memory around that. And so let's just kind of look at some of the things we covered during that discovery session. So the ChangeWorks system. Now, we talked to you before about how we use this off-grid and how we might use this on-grid. Off-grid means you're using it in a purely conversational sort of way. You might employ a diagram or two to help illustrate whatever points you're trying to make as your client is learning about the way they're responding to all the different things that a particular situation is involving. But you could also do it using the online system. We'll touch on that again in just a few moments, but very important for you to know that all the online system does is draws nicer diagrams. So it doesn't provide any sort of interpretation or anything like that. That's really for you as the professional to do, working with your client to help them discover for themselves whatever it is that's going on and help them to develop for themselves whatever their action plan is going to be. But it's nice to have nice looking diagrams, and using the online system, you can have things that look very professional and share those with your clients so they've got something that they can really use as a reference guide as they work their way through their development.
So T, let me just ask a question. So the real skill of this for the coaches out there is understanding your client's tension, paying attention to it, and knowing how to do change grid maneuvers with your coaching skills, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everyone keep in mind that the ChangeWorks system has existed long before the internet was even developed. So long before there were computer software solutions available, long before there were even personal computers, there was ChangeWorks. And this was completely a conversational technique that employed the use of certain diagrams, again, to help people get some clarity. But we don't need to have any of the modern day automation capabilities that we have. So we want you all to know that what this is really doing is putting a spotlight on you as the professional. It's showcasing your abilities, your insights, your understandings as you go about helping your client to work on whatever it is they've engaged your services to help them with. So the very important thing to do is that the ChangeWorks system is older than all of those technologies, and so it is not dependent on any of those technologies. It really is about you understanding what level of productive tension your client is experiencing about each of the mission critical activities they need to be working on, and then help them to better monitor and manage the flow of that productive tension as they work their way from where they are to wherever it is they'd like to go. So to do that, we follow these 6 basic steps. Step number 1, walking the path of self-discovery. As we talked about during that lesson, the path of self-discovery is a structured questioning technique that we use that helps us to help the client clearly understand their current situation, their desired situation, whatever obstacles they might have that need to be addressed, developing a specific solution for overcoming those obstacles and reaching those objectives, and finally helping them to make an emotional connection to whatever that desired outcome is. And so those are the steps of the path, and we'll be reviewing that in action in just a couple of seconds. From that, what we're trying to do is extract a set of activities that the client is going to need to prepare for, think about, or perform as as they move towards their desired outcome. So for people to make any sort of change occur in their life, something has to change. And maybe it's changing the way they're thinking, maybe it's changing something they're actually doing. Those all end up being activities that the client needs to put on their list. And so we want to define those activities. Now, once we define the activities, in the very early stages, we would simply ask people a couple of questions. Well, how do you rate your ability to handle that particular situation or perform that particular activity? And the second question is, how difficult do you think it's going to be? And that was our idea at that point in time of administering the assessment. And then step 4 was plotting the responses on the change grid. Again, we have paper and pencil diagrams that we could just draw a little thing. Well, here you are on the change grid. Let me show you what's going on, and then we can have our discussion around that. So now, if you were going to use the online system to help you draw prettier pictures, then you would be doing this using the online capabilities. Then step 5, you're going to read the change grid. Basically, you're going to lead your client in sort of a discovery and awareness sort of session around what their plotting means, and see if it resonates with them, see if they're okay with that particular response that they're having. And if they are, great. If they're not, then how do we go about helping them to move, which is step 6, developing ChangeWorks action plans. And so this is what we're going to be basically showcasing you today, the ChangeWorks system in action. Now, as we do it, we did talk about the path of self-discovery, and I did share with you that the main steps you'll be leading your client through are defining the current situation, their desired situation, the obstacles that stand in their way, a solution that they feel will effectively eliminate those obstacles and help them reach their desired situation, and ultimately what's going on with their internal environment, what's going on with them emotionally, and what's going on with that intuition and those sort of extrasensory sorts of perceptions around what's going on with their situation. So that's the path. Now, many of you, as we said during this lesson, have your own questioning techniques, and you are certainly more than welcome to use those questioning techniques at this stage of the ChangeWorks system. We would just encourage you very strongly to make sure that your questions do touch upon all 5 of these particular steps. So as long as you're asking them to tell you about their current situation, their desired situation, as long as you're helping them to identify what the actual or potential obstacles may be, helping them to develop a solution, helping them to explore what's going on with their internal, emotional, and psychic sort of environment, it's all good, you know. So, but obviously, we're quite passionate about the path of self-discovery. Now, from that again, we might choose to dive deep for the desired situation. Is what we're reading here, the 4 aspect control. So as far as making a particular change is concerned, what do you hope to gain as a result of making that change? What do you hope to lose as a result of making that change? What do you not want to gain, and what do you not want to lose? So as we look at any kind of change situation going on in our lives or anything we're considering doing, it's very important for us to just stop for a moment and fill out these 4 quadrants so that we get a complete picture of what it is we're actually trying to accomplish. I have found, and I think Dave can share with you several stories in his recent coaching work, where he will have a client who does a phenomenal job of fleshing out 1 or 2 of these quadrants, but hasn't really thought about the other 2 or the other, you know, big one. And inside of that empty quadrant could be the deal breakers or the most important elements that need to be factored in to whatever the action plans might be. So does that resonate with you, Dave?
It does. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yep. So, and usually people have no trouble filling out what they want to gain. And sometimes they'll talk about what they want to lose, but only when they start getting into the real work do they go like, but I didn't want to gain this. I didn't know it was going to take so much time or it was going to be so much work or whatever. And, I didn't want to lose a whole lot of, and so it's like suddenly the reality starts to express itself. Wouldn't it be great to probe that a little bit earlier in the whole process to know what's going on in the lower half of this little matrix? So those are the four aspects of control. We use this interactive tool very extensively. Then when it comes to the obstacles, we're just trying to say, look, if you know where you're at and you know where you want to go, why aren't you already there? Well, you're not already there because there is some obstacle or set of obstacles, real or imagined, that are in your way. And until these obstacles can be identified and dealt with, what's the likelihood that someone's going to reach their desired outcome? So certainly it's going to be far easier if we can just stop for a moment and say, we live in a real world, and in a real world, we're going to encounter challenges. There's going to be hurdles we have to overcome. There's going to be missing resources or things that pop up as we move along. Why don't we stop for just a moment and say, what might those be? And as we think about what those might be, perhaps we want to develop some sort of a plan that incorporates the reality of encountering those along the way. So when we're getting into an exploration of what the obstacles may be, we do like to divide those obstacles into the four main categories. These we refer to as the four root causes of poor performance. And those are that we're unaware of something, that if we were aware of it, things would be great. Maybe we are unable to do it because there is some key skill that we are lacking, or we haven't got quite up to the level that it really needs to be. So there's an issue of ability to do that. Ability could also include having the resources necessary to actually follow through and do whatever it is that needs to be done to get you where you want to go. We do find that there are plenty of people that are fully aware and fully able, but for whatever reason, they're unwilling to move forward. In fact, in a coaching relationship, this is something that appears again and again. We have clients who say, no, I know exactly what I need to do. I know why I need to do it. I have all those insights I need to have, and I've got all the resources that are necessary. I've got the skills. I've got whatever it takes, the time, the money, the authority, the whatever. But something is holding them back. For whatever reasons, they aren't moving forward yet. Well, this now starts to look into unwillingness. Is it purely a matter of timing? Is it an issue that's deeper than that? And so we need to explore what these obstacles of willingness may be. And then the last one does come up frequently, but hopefully earlier on in our discussions, the issue of suitability. So is this goal really the client's goal, or is this somebody else's goal that has been imposed upon the client? Is this something that falls into the client's wheelhouse, or is this a departure from what they're comfortable doing or interested in doing? Is it something that is really just such a mismatch for them that while intellectually they might see value in doing it, and capability-wise they might believe they can really do anything they put their mind to, in the long run it might simply not fit? And so whenever we're working with a client and they've come to us and they haven't been able to achieve their outcome, you just want to stop and go, I wonder if it's an issue of awareness, ability, willingness, or suitability. And these are the four areas we like to explore when we're getting into the obstacle step of the path of self-discovery. Now, once all this is done, then of course we want to ask them some questions about those activities. And so we name an activity. So let's say that the person is, we used the example before of looking for the new career. Well, okay, so maybe activity number one is updating the resume. Okay, well, that's a great activity. It's a task, something needs to be done, but we could also be looking at goals and options. We just want to make sure we state them as verbs. We also then, oops, sorry. Da-da-da, da-da-da. We also then want them to rate themselves. So we would just say conversationally, how do you rate your ability to do that? And they might say low, moderate, or high, or we might give them a scale on a scale of 1 to 5, or if we're using the online system, 0 to 12. So how do you rate your ability to do whatever the activity happens to be? And then as I mentioned before, how challenging do you think it's going to be? And again, they might say it's going to be easy, it's going to be difficult, something in between. Maybe they'll use a numerical scale in a conversational deployment of this. Maybe we can use the online system and get it very tightly defined. But we want to ask them, how do you rate your ability to do this? How challenging do you think it's going to be? Now, it's also important, I think, to ask people how important they really think it is. Now, this is particularly useful if you were detecting an obstacle of willingness or an obstacle of suitability. Because if they say, well, truth is, it's not all that important to me. So you go, well, how is it then on your list of things to do? And if it isn't all that important to you, how does that ultimately affect the level of motivation you have, the amount of energy you'll be willing to put into this? So what's going on with that importance rating? Now, if they say their ability is high and the challenge is low and the importance is great, well, then we've got good things to go. But even if they say that they've got great ability to handle whatever that challenge happens to be, if they say it's just not all that important to me in the big scheme of things, there's a discussion that needs to be had, and that discussion is very much about that willingness parameter or the suitability parameter. Thoughts about any of this, Dave?
No,
Anything
it's
want to
all
chime in?
no, it's
All
all
right.
good reinforcement here.
Okay, good, because we're going to be doing this. So again, we'll be walking this to the system, and as we do this, I thought it might be interesting to go ahead and use the online system, just so we've got some nicer illustrations to be able to show. Again, you could be doing this purely conversationally. You could be doing this with a piece of paper in front of you, one of the diagrams in front of you. But because we do have access to the system, let's go ahead and let the system do what the system was designed to do. Now, just as a reminder for everyone, once you finish lesson 8, the next thing that you go through is private training with me on how to use the online system. And we'll be teaching you how to use the online system both for creating personal change grids, as well as for doing individual change grids. So let's go ahead and switch to that one for just a second. So let me go ahead. I'm going to have to stop the sharing for a second and share something different with you. There we go. So right now, you guys should be looking at the online system. And what I did, when you log in, you're going to have a couple of choices on your dashboard. So you can look at your personal change grid, and it's called your personal changer because it is your personal change grid. But we can also create a profile. This is what we'd be doing usually with an individual client. But because we're talking, I want you to know another way to use my personal change grid. And that is, if I am sitting right next to my client, or we're on the phone talking with one another, and perhaps we're using one of the online systems like Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever, rather than go through the relative complexities of creating an individual profile, I like to keep things very easy and conversational. And so sometimes I'll use my personal change grid just because it's fast, it's easy, and it's readily available. So Dave, do you do the same thing with your clients?
Yeah. I mean, that's one way I do it. Another way I would do it is I would have the conversation and develop the activities in one session,
Mm-hmm.
have them take a change grid between sessions
Yes.
based on that activity list, and then we would have. And again, I guess I want to just chime in here a little bit. When you say read the change grid, I think is it fair to say another way to express that is you're facilitating a coaching conversation around that drawing in a sense, right?
Yeah, in fact, we'll demonstrate that. So I'll let you
Yeah,
guys know what is the actual reading part of it, and what is the actual, when is it? Because it's probably 90% coaching and 5%. Well, let me tell you what that spot means, and then
right,
you can tell
right.
me if it resonates with you. So anyway, if I'm having a side-by-side conversation, or we're doing something like we're doing right now, I prefer to use my personal change grid engine to do this. And so here's how it all works. So Dave, would you care to be the client?
I will give it my best shot.
Thank you so much. All right, so pretty much now again, just so that you guys can understand the dynamic of what's going on here. Because I know Dave so well, because we've been together for such a long time, I wouldn't start with all of the usual formalities that you would go through with a brand new client. So for just for the sake of this little demonstration, just want you to all know that Dave and I have been working together for a long time. We have this very easy way of exploring things, and he has some solid familiarity with the way the world of tension management operates. And so with that, I'll say, all right, so Dave, anything specific you'd like to focus on for our time together today?
Yeah, sure. I just got engaged to do a speaking engagement in a few months. It's a few months away, and I really want to like some coaching on that.
Okay, great. So now again, everyone, I'll give you a little side commentary too. We now have a general subject area. I'm going to now start a walk along the path of self-discovery. So the first step is the current situation. So Dave, tell me a little bit about this opportunity.
Okay, well, this is a new group that I've never spoken in front of before, had any kind of interaction with. It's made up of a lot of potentially ideal clients in my target market. So it's a real great opportunity. It's going to be fun. It's going to be in Disney World, and it's at a conference, and I have an hour. And
Mhm.
I'll also be at the meeting too before I even speak, so I'll have some time to interact with people even before I actually do my formal keynote. So.
Mhm, mhm. Now, again, if we were using this inside of a normal session, we could take our time and really dig deeper into knowing more and more about the current situation. So some of the questions I might want to ask Dave would be about the people that are actually hiring for this. So Dave, have they specifically told you any sort of objectives they have for your session? So as we start to think about what you might want to do, so have they already spelled out for you what their expectations may be?
I wouldn't say they spelled them out. In fact, I think part of it is them even part of the challenge is even figuring out what they want. I think they're kind of guessing that what might be popular. And I mean, what I can gather is that they certainly want something that's engaging, that helps people feel good about coming to this conference and becoming members, and they want to obviously grow the membership. So, um, they want to put on a good program. So this would be part of that program. So.
Excellent. So again, side commentary. We could spend whatever time any of you as in the role of the coach would feel would be useful to the client in exploring that current situation in greater detail. So I might want to know who have they used in the past, what sort of feedback he has been, they've shared with him about how effective those other presenters might have been, maybe more about the audience makeup, anything like that that you think might be helpful, because obviously he's asking for guidance about the how putting together whatever that may be. So important for Dave to have thought about whatever those current situation elements might be. But so let's just say that's done. Now we move on to the second section. And by the way, from what he said, in the current situation, I didn't hear any activity that I feel is something we'd want to pursue on a change grid. That'll change very quickly as we get into the desired situation. So Dave, what are your personal objectives for this particular event? What do you want to get out of it?
Well, yeah, I would like to obviously deliver or over deliver on what they want and give a presentation that really impacts the audience and kind of hits a home run.
Okay, great. And you also mentioned about the audience is filled with some potential clients.
Oh yeah, so that would be another outcome, would be to get clients out of this, certainly.
Great. So now, if you guys are watching the screen, you see all I'm doing right now is just writing down a couple of the activities that Dave is sharing. So give a presentation that impacts. Now, very important that we use Dave's words. So Dave, tell me about that again. You want to give a presentation that what?
Give a presentation that knocks it out of the park.
Okay. Knocks it out of the park. Okay, great. And then the second one we said you wanted to, as far as getting some new clients, tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I guess if I broke it up a little bit, I would say acquire a lot of leads. Let's say acquire a dozen or more leads.
Okay.
And convert. Convert at least 40% of those leads. How about that?
That's great. Okay. Any other objectives you might like to put out for this particular event?
I'd like to be asked to do a keynote the following year, that they're so impressed they want to have me back.
Great. Oop, just 1 second. So the real outcome is to get booked for a keynote.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good grief.
Yeah. Like another keynote, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I obviously could edit this to shorten it if we want.
Well, we're just letting people get an idea. Now, obviously,
Right.
if I was going to do a full development of the desired outcome, I'd want to work all the way around there. Now, so far, what Dave has done very naturally is told me what he wants to gain as a result of this particular opportunity. So now I could say, well, let's look at the other three quadrants on that 4 aspects of control diagram. Is there anything you might want to lose? Anything you might want to get rid of, discard? What do you hope as a result of making the change that you might want to no longer?
What do I want to lose? Well, it took a lot of work to get this keynote, so I'd want to lose the hassle of getting an additional keynote.
Okay, all right, so that's great.
I'd want to make that much more seamless. So.
Okay. All right. And then, just work right. Is there anything you don't want to gain as a result of this?
Well, I certainly don't want to gain a bad reputation if I don't do a good job, right?
Well, what's the chances of that happening?
Well, we're going to make sure that it's close to 0.
Perfect.
That's what I'm paying you for, Coach. So.
Okay, there you go. All right, and so do you want to explore that in greater detail?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, and I might be jumping to the next quadrant too. I know one of my clients who's on the board there, kind of helped sell me into this. And so I want to make sure that I don't lose the trust they have in me, that again, by delivering, that they feel good about it, and want to protect that relationship and even help them get business too while I'm there. That would be something else, maybe another goal.
Okay, you see what I've just typed there. So
Hmm.
protect the trust that my ambassador has in me.
Yes,
Does that
yes.
resonate with it? All
Hmm.
right, now we would then move on after we flesh this all out, and I would say, all right, well, Dave, what do you think could make this challenging? What's in your way? What are the obstacles? What do you think you might encounter?
I think one of the challenges is that there are some unknowns about. I've never spoken in front of this group before. I don't trust the board has a its finger on the pulse of what the audience would really want.
Hmm. So now,
So there is. I'm trusting they do, but they could be wrong. They don't really know. They're just kind of going by. This might be something I might be interested in going to. You know.
so now this is for everyone's understanding. When someone shares with us an obstacle they feel they face, the verb that we're looking for is always to overcome that obstacle. And what I find very useful is to, rather than write down overcome the obstacle, is to say to the client, well, how do you think you might be able to minimize that? Or head that off at the pass. So what would you need to do to avoid that obstacle? Now we're getting a little bit more into the solution side of
Yeah,
things, but
that one I'm not sure because I think um, because I suggested, well, maybe you want to survey the group and all that, but I think they've done that. They say they don't really answer surveys and stuff. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot I can do other than make sure I have a great presentation that I think will work uh, with that particular audience. So, but there's a little bit of risk there.
okay. So shall we explore that in more detail, or are you comfortable moving forward?
I'm comfortable with that. There's some other things I have in mind
Okay. All right.
that
Well,
might be better.
um, let's then take a look at the next little step of this process. I'd ask Dave to give me some ratings. So, Dave, how do you? Let's go back to activity number one: giving a presentation that knocks it out of the park. Let me go ahead and edit that. That knocks it out of the park. How do you rate your ability to do that on a scale of 0 to 12?
Hmm. Well, I like to believe it's higher than this, but I'm going to put an 8 on that.
Okay. And I'm just going to set the size at 6 for now. And
Hmm.
the challenge, how challenging do you think it'll be? Give a
Um,
presentation that knocks it out of the park.
let's say a 10,
A 10. And how important is it?
12.
A 12. Okay, now when it comes to acquiring a dozen or more leads from this event, consider your ability to make that happen. Again, I'm just going to size on all of it. And for everyone, I'll explain what it is when you go through your private training. Mm-hmm.
My ability, a dozen more leads. I'm going to say a 9.
And how challenging is that?
Uh, 7.
Hmm. How important is it?
Uh, 11.
Okay, next one. Convert at least 40% of those inquiries to clients.
That would be my ability, I'd say, is a 10,
Mm-hmm. Challenge.
11,
Importance.
12.
Okay. Get booked for another keynote with the same client.
Depends how number one goes, I think. um, I'm going to say my ability is a 7 on that.
Okay. The challenge.
I think the challenge is going to be a 11.
And the importance.
Um, a 9.
A 9. Okay. Two more to go. Make getting the next engagement easier.
Okay, that's kind of similar, I guess.
Well, I think you were chatting about getting engagements with others.
No, I was really thinking about going through this process with this particular group.
Oh, all right.
So let's assume those are kind of the same thing.
Shall we just eliminate that activity then?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're close to the same thing.
Okay, great. And then how about protecting the trust that your ambassador has in you?
Let me give myself a 10 on that. And the
The
challenge is
challenge,
an 8.
an 8. And the importance,
12.
12. Let me go ahead and save the work. And let's go ahead and look at the change grid. All right, so now, again, for everyone, we could have done all this one at a time, purely conversationally. We could have just, worked our way through them as they appeared. But sometimes for the sake of efficiency and doing our work, it's good to kind of let the conversation happen, capture activity as you go along. And then as Dave said, if you spent your whole session having the conversation, maybe you're going to build the activity after the session and then over to your client to give some thought to and fill it out then. But again, we were talking, we wanted to do this live, and so that's what we've ended up doing.
And by the way, T, I think there's a lot more that we haven't even gotten to yet.
Oh yeah.
So for the sake of time, so I get that. So.
Well, sure, but let's go ahead. So, does something in particular come to mind?
Well, I think with number one, like when I think of challenges for that one, because that one's really on my mind a lot. I'm giving this presentation over lunch. Okay, so so there's some challenges related to the logistics, and they'll get their lunch in one room and bring it to another, and they'll try to filter them in, but they may sit out in the other room. They may not even come in, and if they do come in, they could come in at different times. They could get distracted on their way in with someone they want to network with. So getting them there, and then once they're even there, you've got the whole distraction of them eating something, as well. So there's just some logistics.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting obstacle because that would affect your ability, if you think about it, to be able to be effective if the audience isn't physically there, but not mentally there. Yeah.
So that's one. I think another one is the topic they chose has exercises and things I'd like to do, and how do you do that in a keynote scenario so that it keeps the flow going, it's effective. So it's kind of creating those pieces. Exercise and interactivity, those kind of things,
Okay. So now again, this is a very common thing that happens. We're just going to continue to populate the list, and you'll see the numbers will all adjust as we work our way through that, but got to go back now and say, okay, Dave, giving an effective talk while people are eating, how do you rate your ability to do that?
My ability, let's say a 9.
9, okay, and the challenge?
Challenge is 11.
Okay, how important is it?
12.
All right.
You want to delete that one above that?
Yeah, well.
It's just bugging me because I have my OCD or whatever.
No worries. Okay, incorporate exercises, interaction into a keynote. I don't judge. All right, so how do you rate your ability to effectively incorporate exercises and interaction into a keynote?
I think my ability's 11 on that.
Okay, and the challenge?
I think the challenge will be a 5.
A 5, okay, and the importance?
10.
10. Now, one thing I want to draw to everyone's attention is that Very often, in fact, in the old days, we really didn't explore importance as a separate dimension because our thought is that if I have a client who's talking about something, it's got to be important enough or they wouldn't have brought it up. And Dave's ratings for importance clearly indicate that everything is a 9, a 10, an 11, a 12. He didn't say it was a 2 or a 3. So um, so I think that this is just kind of showing that people tend to share with us things that are already important to them. So don't be at all surprised if you don't see a lot of low numbers when you're using this in the style we are now. That being said, let's say that you create the activity list, you send it to your client fills it out, but because of the way you might have phrased something or whatever, they might say, well, truth is, that's not important to me. So when you see their results and you go, wow, they only rated the importance there as like a 3 or a 4, that tells you something very important about the next discussion to have with them. Okay, so let me go ahead and save the work here. And let's go ahead and we might as well look at all of them. All right. Come on, change grid. Thank you. All right. So again, each one of the numbers corresponds to one of those activities. And so now the client can see exactly what's going on. So here's his activities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. So 7 would be eliminating. So no 7. Now we say, well, now you want to read the change grid. So let me just demonstrate for you what reading the change grid would actually sound like. So the first thing I'd say, well, Dave, as far as the situation is concerned, I think it's really interesting that none of these activities have put you up in distress, and none of these activities have you down in apathy. So what do you make of that?
I guess. What do I make of that?
Yeah.
Well, nothing is way over my head in terms of to do that I would be losing sleep over it, and nothing is so easy for me that I've totally mastered it either, and I can put it on automatic pilot. So those are two conclusions I have.
Yeah, and so I think that's a very important thing for you to kind of realize as you go through this process of developing whatever this overwhelming for you. And it also isn't something that's just another day at the office. So it's interesting enough to be engaging. You feel very, based on your plottings on here, I see a lot of plotting outgrid. The further outgrid you plot as you're learning your training, the more confident you are about it. So there's a leadership sort of an element being pulled into. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and so again, as a little sidebar, all we're doing in a reading is we're basically saying this to the client. Client, I know because I'm the professional what each of these locations mean. And I'm ready to share with you as the client whatever amount of detail you'd like to have as far as each one of these locations may contain. But ultimately, this is a conversation I'm having with you. So I'm going to share with you maybe an insight or two, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, and you can tell me if that resonates with you. Maybe that triggers you to have more thoughts and share more of your story. So that's what we want to do, is make sure that this isn't a now I'm reading your tea leaves kind of an experience. No. This is you talking to you about you. A change grid is always you talking to you about you. I just want to share with you a couple of the little things that I have available about what's going on. So, for example, of all of these activities that you've listed here, the one that is plotting the furthest up grid is activity number 4. Activity number 4 is getting booked for another keynote. Now, interestingly enough, although it is not plotting very high when it comes to tension, it's not up in stress, it's barely in power stress, relatively speaking, it is the activity that carries with it the highest level of productive tension for you. And so, you rated your ability as being a 7 and the challenge as being an 11. So of all these activities, that was your lowest rated ability and one of the highest for the challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, this one, remind me of the activity. The activity is
This is you getting booked for the next year's keynote.
yeah, well, I think there's more out of my control there. It feels like there's they may not want to book the same person again for a keynote.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
this is one of 3 keynote speakers they have, so they could. In fact, this is something new. Usually they get like a celebrity or someone like that to do the main keynote. And then they got 2 other people to do these keynotes. So there's a chance I could get a repeat. In fact, I proposed a few different topics, and they were kind of going back and forth over those topics. And one said, "Well, maybe you can do this another time." So that made me think, okay, well, it is possible. But I think because of the way this group operates, they don't necessarily think about this stuff much between meeting to meeting. I just think there's more out of my control. I guess that's the short answer to it.
Okay. And so again, as a sidebar, what we could do now is say, well, let's go ahead and start talking about how this location is serving you, and whether or not it's an activity you might want to move elsewhere on the change grid. But instead, what I'd like to do, just for the sake of the demonstration, is talk about 2 others, and then I'll switch to the background image and share a little bit more insights around how the plottings are actually happening. So, for example, activity number 3, which is converting at least 40% of those leads, putting the furthest out on that highest level of drive with
KT,
tell me a little bit. Yes.
you're really fading in and out on
Yes.
that. So let's redo that when you start talking about those other 2 activities, because you faded out quite a bit there from
Okay.
the audio.
All right. So, pardon me. So, as a sidebar, what we could do now is go into a deeper discussion around activity number 4, which is again getting that keynote for next year. We could explore whether or not this location is serving Dave's intention well, or whether or not he can come up with another spot on the change grid would be more effective, and then we could move him. And so there's lots of things that we could be doing if we want to just focus on this activity by activity. But I think that the other layers of the change grid are going to give us other insights that might better inform us as to how to proceed. So to help that, though, what I'd like to do first is look at 2 other activities, just so you guys can see some of the extremes that are going on Dave's grid. So activity number 3, Dave, which is converting 40% of those leads to clients, is the activity that's plotting the furthest out grid. So the further out grid someone plots, if you remember, the more driven they are to make that happen. So tell us a little bit about that. What's that drive all about?
I have a lot of internal passion about selling. That's the way I bring revenue into the business.
Mm-hmm.
I feel pretty good at it once I have someone that is interested. Have a lot of confidence really in what I have to offer. And yet does bring with it some challenge as people are investing in it. So there's some work to be done there. So.
Right. And so it's interesting from what you've just said about activity number 3, again, converting those leads into clients, and what you shared about activity number 4, which was getting that keynote. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about deploying some of that great confidence and drive and the ability of a 10 for closing a new piece of business. What might you be able to apply to getting an additional piece of business with this existing client?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, again, I think where I'm feeling on number four is maybe less control. Like there may be some rules. You're dealing more with a committee than an individual.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, so I think one of the things I could do some things at the meeting in terms of getting to know the people better individually
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
kind of laying some groundwork. So I think using relationship uh, would kind of change that location
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to maybe a more confident place. So
Right, and interestingly enough, you've just shared one of the downgrade maneuvers, and that's what we would want to do is to move you to a place on the grid where you realize that your level of ability is actually greater than the 7 that you've reported. And if you can kind of see that there are other resources that you can tap into, there are questions you might want to be asking to get that sort of detail, how does that impact your perceived level of ability to get the outcome you're looking for?
no, it does move it up definitely.
Hmm.
There's more at play than maybe I was thinking at first.
Right, and see, so I wanted to bring this up just so I could share with everyone who's watching that if we were just going to isolate our dialogue around one activity, we may not have very easily come up with the insight that Dave has a lot of ability when it comes to talking a brand new prospect into becoming a client, getting that additional booking. I wonder if there's something in here that he might do. Now, Dave, going back to this, you did mention that sometimes organizations just want to have somebody new just to keep it all fresh. It's got nothing to do with
Hmm.
what your talent was or your performance. They just want somebody new. That's the nature of being a keynote speaker.
Hmm.
Um, but Okay, so Dave, I certainly know that getting booked as next year's keynote speaker has a lot of things could impact it. For example, sometimes no matter how strong a presenter's keynote might have been, they just want somebody new. They're just trying to keep it fresh. And so it isn't really a reflection about your performance. It's just about them trying to get the new name or the latest idea or whatever. That being said, though, even if they brought you back next year in the same capacity as they have you in this year as being one of the presenters that they would have, how would you feel about that?
That'd be great.
Right, and so how would you rate your ability to just get invited back to speak again next year?
Um, I think. I think that's what I was thinking, actually, to be honest, when I
Hmm.
originally answered it. It, you know, but I think if I do a good job, I think there's a decent chance because, again, they have seen other topics I could do. So they
Hmm.
could keep
Hmm.
it fresh and have me come back. Um, and it wouldn't be just a repeat
Right.
because, a lot of keynote speakers, they have their one talk. But I showed them three different talks I could do, and they liked all three. And they were particularly intrigued with one, but they said, I think this might be a little better if we have to choose, but I'd really be interested in hearing this other one. So,
Hmm. Hmm. All right, excellent. And so does that impact the rating you would give yourself for ability, or are we still at a 7?
no, I think, with that plus the fact that I'm going to have some flying time with the people to develop more of a
Hmm.
relationship and get to know them personally, I think that would increase it a couple points at least.
All right, then. Now, again, for everyone who's listening to this, rather than going through reading every single one of these activities, one of the skills the professional should have, and certainly I would like that all of you as coaches already of this, is you pick up on certain things some aspects of what's going on with the client, and you find ways to connect those together. The change grid helps you to support that, and then to also immediately ask the client if that was useful to them. And so what just happened is that we had Dave tap into his skill set from number 3, apply it to activity number 4, and that ended up increasing his perceived ability. So right there, good things have just happened. The other one I'd like to just draw your attention to for a moment is activity number 8. Dave, it's the only one that plotted down in power apathy. And again, for everyone's benefit, power apathy sounds like this. I know I need to do something, but this isn't particularly challenging. And it's a matter of things in power apathy become very predictable. We're looking for structure, routine, processes, procedures, things to kind of be set into place. And Dave, that was how you rated incorporating exercises or interaction into a keynote. So what do you think that plotting is telling you about your ability to do that?
Well, it's telling me I have plenty ample ability to do it, and I think I do. I think I've already have some ideas about how I might approach that. So I think that's why
And
I
so,
plot it
because
that
look,
way.
you gave yourself, nothing else got an 11 for ability. So of this set of activities, you rated your ability highest on that. And against all the rest of the abilities, you found this one to be the easiest, only a 5. The next lowest was a 7. And so this is your highest level of ability, the lowest level of challenge. So this would say, this particular location would indicate that you already have things in mind. You are not feeling in any way threatened by this. It's a very, not only that it's something that can be done, it's something that you've already done for other clients in other circumstances. So it's almost more like it's a task on the preparation list, but it doesn't pose any sort of a problem for you. Does that resonate?
Yeah, it does. That's exactly right.
All right, so let me just show you guys that as we're having this conversation, you might also want to show a different background that might be illustrating the points you wanted to make a little bit more effectively. So layer number 8, engagement, is the one that I think I'd like to show Dave next. So now for the engagement, I think this is really interesting. When it comes to activities number 3 and 6, and again, that's about converting the leads to clients, and number 6, giving an effective talk while people are eating. Dave is all on top of these. So he's reporting a strong ability to do them, strong enough that even though the challenge represents a stretch, it's not like it's going to throw him out of his general comfort zone for either one of those activities. So he's ready to execute on those particular activities. Do you agree with that, Dave?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. And then he's got 4 activities plotting in this engagement ring. So engagement is that he's actively doing those things that would be useful in helping him to achieve that outcome. So that's activities number 1, 2, 4, and 5. Those are giving a presentation that knocks it out of the park, acquiring a dozen or more leads, getting booked for another keynote, and protecting the trust that the ambassador has in him. So engagement means that he is actively doing things that are constructively helping him to move those things in the direction they need to be moved. So Dave, does that also feel right?
Yeah, now would it count if I haven't actually not actually doing things, but I'm planning on things I'm going to do?
Planning is doing.
Okay. Okay, then
Yeah,
that would
planning
fit
is
then.
part of doing.
That would
Yeah,
fit.
as long as you, yeah, because what comes before engagement is intention.
Hmm.
Intention, the doing hasn't started yet.
Hmm.
So when it comes to activity number 8, which is again incorporating those exercises, you're plotting in down-grid intention. Down-grid intention sounds like this. Yeah, I need to do that. I'll get around to it.
Yeah,
So you're
that's
not
right.
actively figuring out the exercises or what those interactions are going to be, but you're more than ready to do it. It just isn't demanding your attention at this particular moment.
Right,
So
because we're 3 months out still. So
exactly. And so there's not enough tension here yet to get you to pay attention to it. What's going to happen is that as that deadline approaches, what's
hmm
going to happen to the perceived challenge as timeline gets a little closer?
they get higher. The challenge
The
gets
challenge
higher.
is going to go up, and there you'll move right from intention into engagement. Now you're actually doing it, or you're
hmm
executing on it. I know you well enough to know that even though you will get on that airplane with a complete plan, as you get there and you start talking to people, and it's the night before your presentation, who knows what you might decide to throw in or to modify, and
Oh yeah, it's a
yeah,
blessing and
so
a curse, you know.
well, there it is. It's just part of it, because you're going to, do your very best to deliver the program that, well, what was it, activity number one that knocks it out of the park.
Correct.
All right, and so I just wanted to show everyone that as we are using this, we are certainly also going to be using some of these other background images, or we could, if we think that that's the conversation we want to be having with someone at that point in time. This particular layer 5 is a review of the energies. So, and I just showed this one because I can tell you that when it comes to putting together exercises, Dave is currently plotting as a driven analytical. So an analytical is someone who has figured it all out, and a driven analytical is someone who likes to figure it all out, who feels compelled to figure it all out. But again, because his level of tension isn't high enough yet, we're going to put that word yet at the end of it. So he will figure it all out, but not yet. So soon, not yet. All right. So again, how we go about using this, you could switch the background image to help your client to do anything. Again, if you want to do it on paper and pencil, there are paper versions of every single one of these background images. Now, what we also did was we talked a little bit about some of the downgrade maneuvers. So let me just switch back that um, page for just one moment. Here we are. So I'll go back to sharing this. And then I'll show with you, well, through these. We talked about the different maneuvers, downgrade, upgrade, outgrade, ingrid, PowerPoint, as you went through your training. What we did in this little demonstration is that idea about landing the next keynote. Dave kind of all by himself started doing downgrade maneuvers. So he came up with ways to add additional resources, that idea about talking to people once he gets feet on the ground there, and this idea about restoring the resources. He already has other keynote presentations mapped out that they've already been introduced to. He's already got contacts there. And so those were the downgrade maneuvers that we didn't even have to go through together in order to have Dave benefit from them. He kind of decided to spontaneously apply this to his own situation. Thoughts about that, Dave?
No, exactly right.
Yeah. And then activity number 8. Well, we talked a little bit about that, even though right now activity number, which is again about planning those activities, doesn't really need any attention right now. He's still 3 months out from all this. What's going to increase his tension? He could increase his tension if he has further discussion in advance of that presentation. That could change the task by helping him to more specifically focus those exercises towards particular outcomes. So that might be something that's going to happen. But I think what's really going to drive it is boosting accountability. As a deadline gets closer, tension goes up. And luckily, the calendar is always moving forward, and so
Yes, it is.
yeah, time is linear. It only goes in one direction. So yeah, so I don't think that we need to be doing any upgrade maneuvers at this particular point in time. I think that nature will do some upgrade maneuvers all by herself as Dave gets close to that deadline. And I think the other thing is that as Dave gets closer and we have this discussion again as we get more specific, that's when we can start talking about some of these other ways of doing things. So for example, for everyone, increasing the standards. Well, once Dave really knows how big the audience is going to be and what the level of attentiveness is or the level of participation he can really realistically expect people to give while they're also eating, well, that could change the task in some pretty specific ways. So rather than trying to view that meal as being an obstacle, what is it that he might be able to do that incorporates an exercise specifically for them to do while they're eating? So that'll be interesting to kind of explore, but those are upgrade maneuvers right now. Coaching Dave in the moment, I don't really believe that there is any need for upgrade maneuvers to be performed. Thoughts about that, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
All right, so that's what we wanted to do, is just to give you guys kind of a little peek into how the process is actually done. Obviously, it is something that is far easier to do when you're working with a live client with a brand new situation, someone you haven't really spoken a lot to about whatever the dynamic is, and so you just got to kind of jump in and give it a try. Again, your next lesson is private with me, and during that we'll be going over how to use the online instrument, and that's the section of the program for which you receive the resource development credits. So anything else you want to add, Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, T, that, again, this was just a very short demonstration, kind of because of the time constraint. There's so much more we could talk about here, but like, for example, that activity number one, if you're working with me as a client, we may break that apart we may do another change grid with like 10 activities related to that.
Absolutely right.
And say, and really develop the solution around it, and what activities are part of that solution, so this was just a little segment of a kind of a bigger intervention that, I just want people to understand that, realize that.
Exactly. And I think that's why, we want people to know when it comes to tension management, you have a choice, and only you can make the choice. Do you want to do deep dive from the get-go, or do you want to start with a broad understanding and then understand which activities are plotting with the highest levels of tension and use that to inform what your deep strategy is going to be?
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
you
exactly.
always have these options available to you. But the caution we want to always give is that if the only thing you're going to do is talk about what the client immediately presents at the start of a discussion, you might end up finding yourself going down a road that isn't going to take them to where they really want to go, because there were some other activities that are involved that the activity they initially presented were dependent upon.
Yes.
And so the change grid allows you to kind of see all the discussions. Again, remember, the change grid is reflecting to you conversations that your client is having with themselves about themselves. They're not just having one conversation, they're having dozens of conversations.
Yes.
And so you just have to decide which conversations do you want to take a look at before you start doing any kind of a deep dive. We'll be talking about that in great detail as you guys go through your ongoing training. So this is what we kind of do on all the ongoing sessions. People will bring a change grid to the community, and we will work our way through it and help people to understand what the different locations might mean, and the order in which they might want to approach them, and how they might be able to more effectively engage their client in doing some of their own work.
Good stuff.
Yep. Okay, with that, so thank you so much, everybody. Looking forward to your private training.
All right, thank you, T.
Okay, bye for now, everyone.